When there's only one acceptable way to show emotion, whether it's a narrow range of calm or a wide range of expression, the relationship gets smaller. Intimacy lessens. If the only acceptable emotions in your relationship are neutral, the relationship becomes emotionally sterile. Attachment theory explains how you become attached to others, and it's set in the first 1 to 2 years. I want to call out a mistake that most people make when talking about attachment, and that is lumping anyone with any avoidant traits into one category of avoidant attachment. In reality, there are 2 styles that can include avoidant traits. Depending on which one your partner could be, the repair approach is different. This is the way relationships deepen, when there's friction and distress, and you're still there for each other. Every couple who comes to me has the same goal. You want to improve communication. You may even be wondering if you're ultimately compatible. But at some point, this ultimately boils down to one thing. You need a higher distress tolerance. You and your partner keep having the same fight with different words. Consider for a moment that it's probably because you're not incompatible. It's because neither of you can tolerate the other's distress for very long. Let's look at the pattern that plays out. One of you raises your tone, the other demands a calm tone. One of you pulls away to get some steadiness, the other experiences abandonment. One of you chases and pushes for engagement to feel heard, and the other shuts down and withdraws to feel safe. And both of you walk away thinking, I'm the reasonable one. One of you says, why can't you just be calm? The other one says, why can't you just talk through your feelings? This can quickly become a villain story. We're quick to label it with attachment issues or unresolved trauma. But let's step away from labels and who has what issues, and let's talk about it as a capacity story. When there's only one acceptable way to show emotion, whether it's a narrow range of calm or a wide range of expression, the relationship gets smaller. Intimacy lessens. If the only acceptable emotions in your relationship are neutral and pleasant, the relationship becomes emotionally sterile. Conversely, if the only way you feel heard is by increasing intensity, raising your voice, yelling, the relationship then becomes volatile. Exhausted couples aren't over love and caring. They're exhausted because they keep bracing. Bracing for tone, bracing for tears, bracing for shutdown, bracing for escalating or anger. We're not talking about communication here. We're talking about a tolerance issue when one of you gets activated. Before we go further, let's zoom out for a second. Attachment styles, attachment theory gets thrown around a lot online, but I want to clarify that attachment theory is not a personality quiz. At the same time, it's also not a formal diagnosis. It's nowhere in the DSM, which is the official guideline in the US for diagnosing. The reason attachment theory has become so popular, much like the 5 love languages, is because it's so relatable. People can immediately recognize their own relationship patterns through attachment styles. At a high level, attachment theory explains how you become attached to others, and it's set in the first 1 to 2 years. But it's not so set in stone, period. I get this question all the time. Can I change my attachment style? The answer is yes, with some work put in. Your attachment style is formed early, but it's reinforced as you continue to mature. In this way, it can also be heavily reinforced or positively reshaped into something better. Instead of saying, my attachment style is XYZ, it's more accurate to say your nervous system builds its first, let's say, relational template in early childhood, and then life keeps updating that template file. Your attachment style is not your destiny. It's maybe probabilistic, but it's not permanent. And in your attachment database, we'll call it, you have a set of stored interpretations about what closeness means, what conflict means, what distance means, what tone of voice means, maybe what silence means. When something happens in your relationship, your nervous system doesn't just respond to that current moment. It pulls from that attachment database. And depending on what's stored there, you will react differently. So instead of attachment labels or attachment style labels, here's what the 4 types might look like in real life. Some people learned that increasing emotion keeps connection close. Some people learned that lowering emotion keeps things safe. Some people swing between wanting closeness and fearing it. And some people developed more capacity to stay engaged even when things feel uncomfortable. Those 4 patterns are what attachment theory tries to describe. I want to call it a mistake that most people make when talking about attachment, and that is lumping anyone with any avoidant traits into one category of avoidant attachment. In reality, there are 2 styles that can include avoidant traits. There's dismissive avoidant and fearful avoidant. So here's how these 2 might play out in an argument. Let's say you bring something up, such as, I feel hurt that you forgot our dinner date. A dismissive avoidant response might sound like, I don't see why this is such a big deal. You're overreacting. Don't be so dramatic. Can we not turn everything into a thing? Or they shift immediately into problem solving and logic, spreadsheet mode. Now this may come across as indifference or uncaring, cold maybe. But it's actually them, the dismissive avoidant, trying to downregulate the scenario, downregulate emotions. Emotional intensity feels very threatening, either within themselves or from another person, so they minimize, maybe make a joke of it, rationalize, or maybe come across as detached or unfeeling. Why? Because they need a little bit of distance in order to restore their internal stability. Now, let's compare that to a fearful avoidant response. Same scenario. I felt hurt that you forgot our dinner date. A fearful avoidant might say, I can't ever get it right. I'm the worst mother in the world. I'm the worst partner in the world. Or they might initially escalate and get defensive, which would be similar to anxious preoccupied attachment. So a little bit of chasing, pushing, and then withdraw later and shut down. So then you see the pulling, which looks a lot like dismissive avoidant attachment. The key difference between the 2 is volatility. Fearful avoidant patterns often swing back and forth. They want closeness, they want space. Get out of my life, come back. They fear closeness. They might come in hot, then disappear, or apologize intensely, profusely, and then shut down the next day. Dismissive avoidant patterns are more consistently distancing. Fearful avoidant patterns are more push-pull. Both can look avoidant, but one is primarily distancing and downregulating, like deactivating. The other is conflicted and oscillating between push and pull. Put another way, with dismissive patterns, your fight feels like you're just hitting a wall. With fearful patterns, the fight feels like you're on a roller coaster. And I'm calling this out because depending on which one your partner could be, or you, the repair approach is different. With dismissive avoidance, pushing harder usually increases distance. If you escalate, plead for reassurance, or pursue more intensely, they often shut down further. What helps more in the moment is lower intensity, direct, clear requests, giving them space without feeling threatened. And with a fearful avoidant pattern, pure space can feel like abandonment to them. So if you back off too cleanly or too much, they can interpret that as a rejection. What helps more with fearful is reassurance without engulfing them. What also helps is consistency, emotional steadiness. And if you misread fearful as dismissive, you may give too much distance and accidentally reinforce their fear of abandonment or rejection. If you misread dismissive as fearful, you may over-reassure or over-pursue and overwhelm them. But let's get back to this specific dynamic of one person needing more calmness from their partner and the other person needing to be heard. Couples in this dynamic both believe they are the more reasonable one. One says, I just want a calm conversation. The other says, I just want to be heard. Both people are trying to protect something. Let's look at another common scenario. You say, I asked you to call the plumber. It's been a week. Your tone is sharper than normal. Followed up by more activation, such as, see, you don't care about what matters to me. The fear underneath this is I'm alone in this. A deactivating response from your partner to this, if we're talking dismissive, might be, why are you coming at me like that? Calm down. Their fear underneath, this intensity feels unsafe. Whereas a fearful response might be, oh my goodness, I can't do anything right. You're right, I forgot to call the plumber. Then later, withdrawing. Withdrawal because the fear underneath is, I'm going to be rejected, so let me withdraw before that even happens or while it's happening. Now here's what a capacity response sounds like. Okay, you forgot to call the plumber. The capacity response would be, you're right, I dropped that, and I can see why you're frustrated. Now what did you notice there? That response doesn't collapse or implode. It doesn't escalate or explode. It doesn't immediately correct the tone of the person bringing it up. That response stays in the conversation, stays in the room. So capacity is not about being calm. Capacity is about tolerating someone else's distress without then dominating them, controlling them, or just flat out disappearing. Now, this is where many people will push back and say, hey, look, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect my partner to talk to me in a calm, controlled manner. I'm happy to talk about anything they want if they just talk to me with the proper tone. I give that to them. Why can't they give that to me? And you are not wrong. It is not unreasonable to want respect, controlled tone. It's not unreasonable to want a conversation that doesn't feel chaotic. And it's not unreasonable to want emotional safety. The question isn't whether calm is good. The question is this: is calm the only emotional tone you can tolerate? Because those are different standards. I mean, let's even talk about the word calm. For the record, if someone is screaming, threatening, being intimidating, throwing things, stepping away is a necessary boundary. But if calm means no raised tone ever, no tears ever, no visible frustration, no distress ever, then intimacy dies, and usually dies a slow and painful death. Because real intimacy includes friction. It includes discomfort. It includes the freedom to be authentic on a certain level. There's a difference between, I can't engage while you're being verbally abusive and attacking me, versus, I can't engage unless you are emotionally neutral. The first is a boundary, a reasonable boundary. The second can become extreme emotional control. Sometimes the person who prides himself on being calm is actually the most emotionally avoidant one in the room. Calm can be maturity, for sure, but calm can also be very distancing. It can be very dissociated. If your nervous system equates intensity with danger, then proper tone becomes the gatekeeper to connection. I cannot connect with you unless you come in with a proper tone. And over time, your partner learns, I can only bring half of myself here. That's where intimacy starts to shrink. In the avoidant person's defense, escalation also shrinks intimacy. If you need your partner to match your emotional intensity or tolerate whatever emotional spiral you're coming in with to feel validated, that's also dysregulation. So one strategy increases intensity and one strategy decreases intensity, and neither strategy increases capacity. I find that exhausted couples love each other dearly, but they fight because neither person has been trained to stay regulated when the other person isn't. And over time, something subtle happens. Both partners start editing themselves. One suppresses their frustration in order to stay calm. The other suppresses vulnerability in order to not be out of control. Conversations become very controlled or avoided altogether. And then the accusations fly. You're being avoidant. Well, you need to go to therapy and work on your trauma. Why can't you just talk to me? Why can't you talk to me in a calm state? And back and forth you go. And that's where the real exhaustion comes from. The issue is distress tolerance. Can you tolerate your partner being dysregulated without collapsing or controlling? Can you tolerate frustration without escalating into attack and intensity? Can you tolerate silence or space from your partner without panicking and overwhelming them? If hearing those questions feels obvious, but doing them feels impossible, that's the whole point. That gap is capacity. And this is exactly why I built my community called The Practice, because most couples don't need another framework or theory or more attachment style knowledge. They need somewhere to train this. You don't increase distress tolerance by understanding attachment styles or pointing it out in your partner. You increase it by practicing staying in the room when your nervous system wants to shut down or control. You increase capacity by practicing self-regulation when your partner needs space, self-soothing. My practice is structured like a gym for this. We train reps, not drown in theory. So reps of staying regulated under heat, under friction, under stress. Reps of expressing without attacking. Reps of tolerating space from your partner without spiraling. And if you've ever said, I know better, I just can't do it in the moment, that's what we work on. Secure attachment isn't about being naturally easygoing. It's about widening your emotional lane through repetition, increasing that capacity through reps, stretching yourself and your stamina through practice, whether it's stamina for distress or stamina in giving them space. Here's one small experiment for this week. When your partner's tone rises, instead of correcting their tone, describe your body, your reaction, such as, I'm getting tightness in my chest. I feel flooded or overwhelmed. I need a minute so I don't shut down. I need some space so I don't shut down. That regulates you. It doesn't regulate them. It doesn't tell them exactly what to do for you to be regulated. It regulates you. If your first instinct listening to this episode was to think about your partner, let's just pause a minute. Where do you demand emotional regulation from them? Conversely, where do you demand emotional expression from them? Emotional expression to feel reassured that the relationship's going to be okay. This isn't about labeling each other. It's about widening capacity on both sides. You don't build distress tolerance through insight alone. You build it through reps, just like the gym. Reps of staying, of softening, reps of not correcting tone, reps of not pathologizing them and calling them avoidant or attacking them when you feel scared. Let me give you one simple rep today for each conflict pattern. If you tend towards anxious attachment, which is formally called anxious preoccupied attachment, where you maybe hyperactivate or escalate, your work is to lower intensity without abandoning yourself. So instead of, you never listen, you're so avoidant, try, I'm scared this doesn't matter to you. Lower your volume by 10%. Lead with the fear, not the accusation or the pathologizing. Your nervous system will want to amplify to reestablish connection, but the rep is staying connected without escalating. The second attachment style, if you lean towards dismissive avoidant or deactivating patterns, trying to always calm down the situation, your work is to stay in the room when you feel overwhelmed. Instead of calm down or you need to speak in a better tone or going quiet, try, I'm getting flooded, or I don't want to shut down. Can we slow this down? Here, you're just naming your internal state. You're not correcting theirs. Again, we're focused on ourselves. Just naming your internal state and sharing that with them. Your nervous system wants distance during conflict, for sure. If you are dismissive avoidant, your nervous system wants distance to feel safe. The rep here is staying engaged without controlling their tone. And finally, for the third insecure attachment style, which is fearful avoidant, if you tend toward fearful patterns, that push-pull, your work is consistency. When you feel the urge to escalate and then disappear, try this. I'm feeling defensive right now. I don't want to withdraw. Give me a minute and I'll come back. I just need a little bit of space first. Then actually come back to the conversation. Fearful patterns struggle with oscillating back and forth. Intensity, withdrawal. Escalating, and then shut down. The rep for you is returning. returning to the conversation, being more consistent in that, not being perfect, but just returning. If you're both exhausted, it's not necessarily because your relationship is broken. It's because neither of you is trained to tolerate that emotional discomfort together. Everyone is great and super zen when we're single. Trust me. When you're single, you think you are just completely healed. To get to an integrated state of emotional regulation, you need to practice tolerating emotional discomfort. This is the way relationships deepen. When there's friction and distress, and you're still there for each other, making apologies, having empathy, hearing the other person out, seeing their messy side and still staying in it. And no one accidentally builds that skill. That skill doesn't get built with time. It has to be practiced. That's what we do inside my community. No labeling or diagnosing, no debating who's more avoidant or who's more anxious. We just train capacity to stay, to soften, to not correct tone, and to not escalate when you feel scared. If this episode felt uncomfortably accurate, that's your sign. You don't need more self-awareness. You just need reps, practice. My community, the practice, is open for registration right now. If you're serious about widening your emotional lane instead of having the same fight again in a week, come train with me. Capacity is trainable, but only if you practice it under heat. Thank you for joining me on Engineering Love, and I'll be back next week with a whole new episode.